Hello, Akira So here, and welcome back to the channel. Today's video essay is going to be a look at efficiency and discussions happening around it. Resources in Fire Emblem are often hard limited between experience, weapons, and deployment slots, meaning that players will have to make a choice as to what resources to use and on whom. As a result, players are either consciously or subconsciously weighing up the relative value of choices all the time. This lends itself well to the human tendency to compare and categorize things, exemplified in the tier list and unit comparison discussions. As a result, it is inevitable that we'll end up with our own community terms. The term that I see paraded around a lot in various settings is efficiency. It is a contentious term and the source of great discussion, both in terms of generating it directly and generating conversation around it. First, I feel I should clarify my stake and background in Fire Emblem discussions. I love Fire Emblem a lot, watching both a lot of other people's content and making content myself, including working on a couple LTCs of my own. There will be mentions of other people's runs and videos. This does not mean that you'll need to have watched or have knowledge of them yourself. I will explain any important terms and concepts, and provide links to them in the full script in the description below if you want to learn more. Now we have to actually ask the question: what is Fire Emblem efficiency? A definition I like is Valkarma's. Efficiency is minimizing wasted action potential, to which I would explicitly add, to maximize output of a given metric. Historically, this involves some weighting of turn count and reliability. These measures of turn count and reliability are exemplified in the forms of the LTC, low turn count, and Iron Man, no reset or rewind run, respectively. In terms of turn count, LTCs ideally aim for the lowest turn count possible, known as the turn floor, which is a concrete measure. An Iron Man that doesn't value this at all may do something such as grind Alan and Lance's support rank up to A in the early game of FE6, or spend 15 hours having Azura dance on Fate Chapter 5 so that she can reach level 36 before the Branch of Fate. Reliability is probability based and therefore less concrete. Still, when Iron Manning, you might assume that anything that can go wrong will. In contrast, in an LTC that disregards reliability, you can get a sentence such as this one from USS Gordon Captain.
Vanessa has 2 pierce crit every single enemy on enemy phase.
There are 7. There are often further defined rules. Many flavors of LTC exist, such as the categories of 0 or 100% growths, incomplete or complete recruitment, glitched or glitchless, and things unique to individual games. Then on the Iron Man side of things, you can apply additional restrictions. Of particular note is Atano, who has completed many Iron Mans of both maddening free houses and engage, such as a 0 gold Blue Lions run. Beyond these two, there are additional metrics that can be min-maxed. The first is real or in-game time, which is both 1. Concrete, and 2. Commonly discussed in game series beyond Fire Emblem. The paragon of this is, unsurprisingly, the speedrun, with Kirby Master having played a key part in developing many of the Fire Emblem games. Secondly, combining turn count minimization and reliability maximization is ETC, expected turn count. This is, at its core, a formula that can be used to compare the reliability of 2 different clears. An LTC clear that relies on low percent crits with non-100 hit rates may have a much higher ETC than its actual turn count. Other resources can also be min-maxed. Some examples include the fund rankings in ranked FE7 runs, which maximizes the monetary worth of held material assets rather than held gold. Flashing Fire's Pacifist Verdant Wind Maddening run, which minimizes the number of enemy units killed, and Zoran's ongoing Lunatic Conquest Train Everyone challenge, which aims to maximize experience distribution so that all 40 of Conquest's normal playable roster reaches at least internal level 25 by endgame. Clearly, there are many different metrics from which efficiency can be judged. Not all contexts value all metrics equally. An LTC may be willing to go through millions of random numbers to achieve a desirable outcome, reflecting a lack of interest in reliability. Still, despite this overview, efficiency is often referred to outside of specific contexts. I will call this general efficiency, i.e., turn count and reliability are both valued to some unspecified extent. So, why do so many discussions refer to general efficiency rather than specified efficient context? Short answer, it's easier for people to talk about. Longer answer, while you don't need to have personal experience of playing a specific format to contribute discussions, context-specific conversations will be both less applicable and accessible to people without experience thereof. As an example of this, the Fire Emblem Efficiency Discord contains around 230 people, most of whom do not conduct documented runs, and tends to focus on LTC play. So it is understandable that we have moved to general efficiency discussions. However, this presents an issue. if criteria for comparative unit judgment are not universally understood and agreed upon, there are going to be points of clarification. Even people playing under the same rule set will naturally have their own individual differing opinions, leading to debate and disagreements. And honestly, that's fine. Evaluating the subjective experience of playing a video game isn't going to be objective, especially if the context is not explicitly stated. Tier lists made for a better defined context may well have conclusions that people could better agree on. Still, these conclusions are not necessarily applicable in other specific contexts. Regardless, discussing general efficiency is more conducive to people actually being able to discuss the games that we play and enjoy, and discussion itself can be its own aim. While imprecise and subjective, a community tier list made by collating multiple people's opinions on unit in individual contexts can still be a reference point and inspiration for further discussion. This, in and of itself, does not present an issue. So, what is the actual problem here? The problem with efficiency discussions is twofold. Efficiency and unit comparisons are often inserted into discussions that are not about comparing unit performance, and efficiency judgments such as good or bad are often given value and moralistic judgments. Starting with the first point about efficiency being inserted into non-efficiency discussions, the primary example of this is a setting where people want to know how to maximize a unit's potential, such as the innocuous question, how do I use Urk? An actual answer to this might be something along the lines of, while Anima Magic does have weapon triangle advantage over light magic, he will on average do more damage to physical enemies, where no weapon triangle is involved. This is because they have lower res, so I would prioritise having him face combat against physical enemies who cannot counter him. A potential response that doesn't actually answer this question may read along the lines of, Urk isn't good, so don't bother with him. Better magical units such as Lucius or Canas join soon enough, and eventually Pent will join. He's the only magical unit you should really be using in a serious setting, and is more important for his ability to use warp at base rather than his combat. This is clearly a different question being answered here, more akin to, should I use Urk, or how should I best use a magical unit in FE7, that perhaps starts with an example of trying to use Urk and not finding him useful, and changes the topic of conversation entirely. This is not necessarily malicious, and may well be well-meaning advice. Still, this unsolicited advice may result in the person who asked the initial question feeling insulted, ignored, or constrained by such a response. This isn't an issue exclusive to Fire Emblem's efficiency discussions. Taking an example from the American rock climbing community, this kind of advice is referred to as beta spraying, telling someone else how to approach a climb when they haven't asked. Beta spraying is heavily socialized against and frowned upon within the climbing community, leading to healthier community interactions and dynamics, and is something that the Fire Emblem community could also stand to emulate. When it comes to the second point of efficiency judgments such as good or bad are often given value and moralistic judgments. I mean sentiments, whether stated or perceived, that judge playstyles and people beyond whether they're efficient or not. Some examples include, that's not the efficient thing to do, therefore you're bad at Fire Emblem. You are playing the game differently from how I do, so you're not playing the game right. Or, you're using this suboptimal unit, therefore you're a bad player. I include stated as people are often less than polite, especially on the internet, and therefore such sentiments have undoubtedly been explicitly made known. The more common issue though, I think, is the second part, the perceived judgment. This can come up in explicitly efficiency-minded conversations such as tier list threads, especially when characters people enjoy using are placed in a quote-unquote lower tier than they should be. A big part of the reason why people become defensive over such placements is that Fire Emblem is a strategy game. As a result, even if not intended, the following logical steps can be made. Someone is saying my strategy is suboptimal, even though it works. They're saying there's a more efficient and therefore clever strategy. They're saying I'm not using the most intelligent strategy. Therefore, this person is insulting my intelligence. People tend to not like feeling as though their intellect is being insulted. The standard letter-based ranking system doesn't help. A tier list may give someone the impression that a D tier unit is unusable, when this isn't necessarily the case. Free Houses is a good example of this, since the ceiling and floor of unit performance are both so high, even though Ash, for instance, is often placed in D tier for his lack of unique utility, he is still workable, and can solo the entire game with sufficient investment. Beyond the intellect aspect, in addition to being a strategy game, Fire Emblem games also have an RPG element, with a cast of characters and plot that people can become attached to. As a result, a person might find it difficult to accept when criticism, fair or otherwise, is lobbied at said character, even if nothing is said about people who use or like said unit. Socializing against beta spraying is already a task that requires community effort, but the perceived value judgment extends beyond that. Other than articulating ourselves better and reinforcing that people can do whatever they like, including making the choice to take other people's advice, there is a limit to what we as a community can do. Especially in the age of the internet, people have to decide themselves when to stop listening to someone else's advice and internalizing intended or unintended messaging therein. Additionally, avoiding the usage of moralistic language like good and bad is an unreasonable expectation. These are video games that people play for enjoyment. It is inevitable that people are not going to be talking with the same level of care as they would with serious social issues. Still, I think that if we as a community collectively communicated better with one another and were more willing to acknowledge the inherent subjectivity of unit judgment, clearer about the context we use to judge units, and not demeaning to context outside the one being actively discussed, and willing to stop bait spraying, and as a community encouraged kindly but firmly discouraging it happening when it occurs, then we would see an improvement in the quality of both efficiency discourse and Fire Emblem discussions more widely. Still, it is understandable that despite the fact that efficiency in the general sense isn't clearly defined, due to their negative experiences of efficiency discourse, some people will have felt excluded and grown to dislike the veneration of efficient strategies, the efficiency crowd, and the meta, an acronym for the most effective tactic available. I have seen refrains such as, "Following the meta is boring," and "If you follow the meta, are you actually playing the game?" In addition to people feeling excluded from the community, this makes me sad, as I believe that there is a fundamental misunderstanding taking place of what both efficiency in its various forms and the meta aim to do and represent. So, what is the point of efficient runs and the meta? I would argue that the point of the meta is to open up gameplay creativity rather than hinder it, and that efficient runs and discussion contribute heavily to its development. At their core, efficient runs are an example of self-challenge and pushing the game to its limits in some form. From efficiently playing and analysing games in different contexts, we as Fire Emblem fans grow to have a deeper mechanical understanding and knowledge of both Fire Emblem mainline games and hacks. The various findings from these runs and conversations combine to form both metas for this specific context and a more generalised meta for individual games or the series as a whole. Contrary to the idea of efficiency and the meta being strict and boring, there are new things being worked on all the time. Many meme strategies are implemented in various efficient Fire Emblem clears, such as 0% growth runs, where the final boss is killed using the trainee with low stats, speed runs that end with 2 consecutive hits of Eclipse, which has terrible accuracy, and Toffee's FE8 Ephraim Route 100% growth LTC, where Lute, who's typically viewed as a worse magical unit than Moldo or Alta, plays a key role. Additionally, many of these runs are collaborative group efforts. Many LTCs build upon the strategies of previous LTCs, and efficiency discussions are built on examples of people's play. The meta is even built partly off of non-efficient contexts, which there is a demonstrated community interest in. In a unit analysis context, John Abo's Breaking Down series on Free Houses is a great example of this, and this spirit is also present in some resource-efficient runs, such as Zoran's Train Everyone run and FE4 ranked runs. Content is made by people who both do the runs and are interested in sharing them with people, so if you want more sandboxy content out there, then you can be the one to show it off. There is plenty of room to mess around with in the meta, and much to be learned from understanding why units, builds, and strategies are valued the way they are. The better you understand why units are viewed as comparatively good, the easier it is to break and play the game however you want, including with non-meta strategies. Instead of being a stifler of creativity, the meta is an enabler thereof. I just think it's a shame that efficiency and the discourse surrounding it is sometimes attributed as the source of exclusion that some people feel from the Fire Emblem community, rather than general social insensitivity that can crop up markedly in efficiency discourse. Conclusion in a sentence. Efficiency discourse is imperfect and has hurt people, but this is not the fault of efficiency and the meta itself, rather people being notably intentionally or unintentionally inconsiderate when efficiency gets brought up. In a few paragraphs, efficiency is multifaceted, and the way in which we as a community talk about efficiency is flawed. This is due to it often being poorly defined and /or being inserted into conversations not about efficiency. As a result, it is understandable that some people have grown to feel excluded from the community due to either explicit or forcibly made efficiency discussions. We can hopefully reduce the chance of this happening by being more willing to acknowledge the inherent subjectivity of unit judgments, being clear about the contexts we are using to judge units, and avoiding demeaning contexts outside of the one being actively discussed, and socializing against the insertion of efficiency into non-efficiency discussions, such as unsolicited friendly advice, known as beta spraying. Taking such steps will not undo the damage done by such discussion, leading to people feeling excluded or alienated from the community and the meta as a whole, despite the resulting impression of efficiency in the meta as stifling and prescribing a singular right way to play. Both are ever evolving, and, if anything, open up additional avenues of approaching and understanding Fire Emblem games. So while people will still have to choose when to stop listening to the word of the meta and efficiency discussions, this is not due to efficiency itself. Similarly, the core issue with efficiency discussions is not efficiency, but rather the lack of social awareness that happens to come out when efficiency gets brought up. If you've watched this video essay to the end, thank you very much. Hopefully you found it interesting and thought I vaguely made sense. I would like to give special thanks to Actual Lizard, John O'Abo, USS Gordon Captain, Eat Your Greens, and Excadrill 1201 for sense checking the script for me, and particularly fellow LTCers Priestess and Lolo Syntonia for helping with a comprehensive rework thereof. If you enjoyed the video, please do let me know, whether it's through liking the video or subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. If you want to keep better up to date with my future projects, you can also join the community Discord, which is linked in the description. Similarly, whether you agree or disagree with me, I would be interested in hearing your thoughts, which you can let me know in the comments. This is a loaded topic, but I ask that people be polite towards each other. Anyway, thanks again for watching. I hope to see you again next time. Until then, have a good one.